guess I'll just get right into it. Welcome back to discussion on experimental film, silent film, avant-garde, cinema, video, stuffs, and etc. etc. Yeah, today we're talking about Lawrence Janiak's, hope I'm pronouncing that last name right, films titled Disintegration Line number 1 and Disintegration Line number 2. And we're finally getting into some actual experimental work here. Totally abstract and non-narrative at all. I mean, there's of course through lines and rhythm to them, but no identifiable story, characters, whatever, all the boring stuff. So the first one, Disintegration Line 1, it starts with this line that splits the screen in half. And slowly this line splits apart or disintegrates apart into all these little blobs and pieces and bits that are all jittering about and fluttering about. And it really feels like we are zooming into this line and examining all the little bits and pieces that create it, like the blobs, the atoms, the cells, whatnot, and they're all jittering about and fluttering about in this extremely seizure-like static. But it's way more organic than static and way more amorphous than static, I would say. Or actually, I guess it wouldn't be since there's shapes in it. Static has no shapes, really. So I guess it is more or less amorphous. But I'll say it's more blobby and more organic. This film and the second film are both really getting at, in my interpretation, the hidden universe of the really small, of energy, atoms, all the bits and pieces that make up our world and our bodies, and light, etc. And the line in the center of the frame even echoes or looks like a stalk of a thorny stalk of like a rose or something. So it is furthering this interpretation I'm having that this stuff, this energy is within every single thing, like the living organisms and the plants, as well as even the celluloid, or the light, or our bodies and our eyes. Now, as I said, there's like this rhythm to the film, and there's all these interlocking parts, and that sort of sometimes cut together, sometimes seem like they not fade together, but morph together in some strange way. And so there's a lot of different shapes that are created in the film. So from what I understand, the films were made by dunking unexposed film into cold water and fixer over and over, which produced these crazy blobs and shapes and exposures that echo like all sorts of different things. And the film, and these shapes are reminiscent of many things in our world. They look like, at some points, they look like stars or cells or rings of energy or electricity in general, just with the jitteriness. Sometimes they look like flowers, fauna, or no, that's flora, sorry. Or lumps of fat, things like this, pond scum, water. It's reminiscent of all these things, little suns. There is this aspect of the very large and the very small, all encompassed in this energy, jittery ball of a film. cells, planets, they're both sort of round, and they both sort of have to work together to make up the universe and whatever other invisible wave, particle, whatnot is going on out there. So it's really trying to all encompass our everything, I guess. And I'll say the first film, which I'll get into the second film momentarily, but the first film feels to me much more intimate and way more diving deep into the small, which I believe it comes through because of, like, it's black and white. It feels more handmade, more organic in that sense. The color of the second one, it does make it a little more graphic and a little more motion graphic-y, which in computerized, even though of course it's not at all. That's just the feeling I get, the intimate feeling of the 16mm black and white. Now, as opposed to that, Disintegration Line 2 expands on the first. I mean, it's extremely similar. It looks pretty much exactly the same, except it's in color and has a way more superimposition or, layering of different film strips. Anyway, you get the idea. And it expands on the first, and this is why it feels so much larger. Where the first one starts with this line down the middle, the second one starts with all these tiny little white dots everywhere. And it's like the stars, it's like space, the cosmos, etc. And it's all waving about. It almost even has this dimensionality to it, which is incredible. It almost feels like it's spinning and turning all these dots in this cosmic soup. It also kind of feels like this one's on 35, but I'm not sure. It just seems way bigger, Now the color adds it further suspends disbelief in a way. Like, it furthers the imaginative view of this invisible world and makes it more vivid. Like, it's more vividly creating something that could be possible. It almost makes it more like a cloud or something. And the way it was done was probably, everything was black and white at first, like black and white film, and then transferred to color film by way of having gels in between, colored gels in between the new unexposed film and the previous exposed film, or exposed, I guess, if you can even say that, the manipulated film. But yeah, it's just, the color is further building up this fantastical world, or glimpse into a world that is created. If there's even a eye or a POV in this film. It is direct animation, of course, so the question comes up if there even is. But maybe it's just to evoke an experience through shape and color and time and motion. Watching this film is like watching electricity or energy or in the infinite in motion before your eyes, which is absolutely astonishing. And it really reminded me of this time I was visiting a national park, and there was this waterfall, and I remember being enthralled in the infinite possibilities of how the water is going to splash and bounce and fly off and whatnot. And it's just, it was a sort of moment where it puts it into perspective, the infinite possibilities that surround us and the unknowable possibilities and the just that we're existing in this entropy soup splashing waves everywhere around us. And this film is probably the closest I've seen to getting that feeling, and it even furthers that feeling by being about light and energy and this imaginative view of invisible particles and whatnot. It's even closer to that infinite possibility. Now, of course, it's like frozen in time and whatnot, and there's only a certain amount of things we see on the film strip. It's not like the film forever goes infinitely and creates new and new possibilities, but as I say, it's just a glimpse into it. And furthering this idea of disintegration, where disintegration is very obvious in the first one, but not so obvious in the second one, because it starts with all these little, already seemingly disintegrated parts, little bits and bobs. But one way that it does feel very disintegrated over time is how the light, or the light is separated into specific colors like red, green, pink, yellow, etc. Blue. Anyway, it feels like the light itself is being disintegrated or extracted or cut up into its separate wavelengths. And I might be wrong on that. I might be wrong on the science for that. The separate wavelengths that create white light. But it does feel like either a further disintegration of light itself, which is important, as opposed to the first one, which wasn't really able to do something like that totally, because it was in black and white. And the added music in the second one is not totally my sort of thing. I mean, the music's really good. I would probably listen to it on my own, but the just added into the film is not my sort of thing. It stands on its own silent. But what I can say it brings to the film is this sort of how should I say, this spiritual aspect to it, like it evokes the idea that these particles or something could be spiritual or godly in some way, and especially like the yellow light. It feels almost sort of golden with the music, and it feels like rays of God's light, or warm spiritual light or something. And at points with the music, it does even evoke this feeling of enlightenment, or being overwhelmed by the spiritual light, or even being enlightened to a certain extent, just by being able to glimpse, a depiction of the spiritual realm, or God's hand, or God's light, or whatever you want to say. And I believe Larry Janiak was religious, so it makes sense why he would want to interweave the invisible world of science and the invisible world of spirituality together like this, in this way, by using the music. at points it's like just an up-close examination of this godly hand or godly force, all the energy that is encompassed in that force. And it really feels like a real light in the dark sort of thing. Like, energy of God's light this is the powerful thing that's lighting up the darkness of space and the vacuum, which is why this film can be sort of enlightening or overwhelming, I'd say. And more personally, I do feel like I've become more cold or structural in my taste and analysis of cinema and art in general, which sometimes stunts my creation of things. But I feel like it's good to watch something like this and more poetic cinema. Not necessarily this is so poetic, it's more illustrative than poetic cinema, but nonetheless, I feel like it's good to take in these sorts of films to just soak in beauty itself, for once, as opposed to all the coldness of like Michael Snow or whatnot. It's a good reminder for me to experience all sorts of different types of cinema and art in general. I don't know, maybe I'll talk more about other types of art on here. And when I say the film is illustrative, it feels very painterly, and honestly, it especially with the not religious, but the mystical aspect of it, it really feels like it could even be close to mystical depictions of spirits and demons and whatnot, that are painted on a wall or whatever. It is an attempt to get to that same invisible realm, just in a more modern way. And then this is going to be a whole other type of ramble, but I was also thinking about, even though this film feels so alive and buzzing and, like this, it feels, it evokes this feeling that cinema can often evoke for me, of this coldness or this death and this frozenness, because I know that each frame is stuck. And yes, we're watching it animated, but each frame is frozen. It's not going to change. The film strip is the film strip. And just like how in conventional photography we freeze that moment, it almost like kills that moment in a way. Motion in film is an animation. Like, it is animated. We are bringing it to life. We are animating it. We are injecting supposed life into light and shadow by way of just making it flicker and move around. And because this film is like so invisible world, energy, electricity, it really feels like that animation. We are seeing that animation itself. Like, we are, when we're watching this film, when we are inside the electronic pumping veins, or the electricity pumping veins of like Frankenstein's monster, and we are watching this reanimation occur. And every film is like a Frankenstein's monster, because we splice together, shots and scenes and music and whatever. You get the idea. So it's almost like this film is the sort of energy that is the animating energy that is flowing through all of cinema, which is obviously pretty grand, but it is, of course, and whatever, it's dramatic, but it is, of course, a film that is hoping, it seems, to get at that invisible world. So I mean, it's more grand to say that it is getting at the invisible energy all around us that is animating all of us and the whole space-time than it is dramatic saying that it's animating cinema itself. But it is a glimpse into this animating energy, which is amazing and beautiful. And yeah, it's a little like it's a little like baby's first experimental film or whatever, and motion graphic-y and purely aesthetic, but again, I think it's going towards something transcendental, and not trying to merely be aesthetically pleasing at all. So in this way, it transcends all that baggage and all that, and becomes sort of larger and more beautiful and much more meaningful to watch to me personally. You know, this is a film to reanimate the light and to reanimate your eyes into seeing beyond what we see now. And the film, I read online here that he's trying to show us or depict Tanmatra, I don't know, which it says here, Tanmatras are rudimentary, undifferentiated, subtle elements from which gross elements are produced. There are 5 sense perceptions: hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. And there are 5 Tanmatras corresponding to those 5 sense perceptions and the 5 sense organs. The Tanmatras combine and recombine in different ways to produce the gross elements: ether, air, fire, water, and earth, which make up the gross universe perceived by the senses. The senses come into contact with the objects and carry impressions of them to the manas, the mind, which receives and arranges them into precepts. Alright, well, so you see that he is trying to get to this invisible makeup of everything, energy, whether it be scientific or spiritual. You know, they're both. So it's 2 ways of getting at the same thing, this invisible world. So yeah. But yeah, I'm glad to actually start getting into some actual experimental or abstract work on the channel. The first video is just sort of a test. While this is still a test, I'm still practicing basically. I am obviously terrible at speaking to the camera, so yeah, so this was discussion on Disintegration Line number 1 and Disintegration Line number 2 from Lawrence or Larry Janiak. They are online and freely available, so I'll link those in the description. And yeah, check out my films as well. I'm a filmmaker, experimental filmmaker. I'll have that in the link down there, connorparsley.com. Keep on watching experimental work and experiencing art.